How's it going, everybody? I'm Ryan. He's Abby. We are the Expansion Bros, and after what feels like forever, he is finally back beside me at the microphone, ready to get us back into some Canucks and Sabres talk. And there's a lot to be talking about right now in Vancouver as Abby proudly displays what looks like the start of the YMCA.
Yes, minus the MCA.
Yeah,
well, I guess it's the start, so it is the Y. Yes, because we have clinched the Pacific Division. Yes.
Vancouver runs the Pacific, man. The Pacific runs through Vancouver.
Yes, and if Dallas loses and the Canucks win, I'm not so good with the Z. Oh, yeah, just with one arm. There we go. Nice Z. That's the potential.
At this point, I think you're just flexing. Thank God people listen to this in their cars and don't have to look at that. So, but yeah, wow. I had to look up. I had to look up what those letters meant, man. Z and Y, like those. I was. You kicked it off by saying like, "Oh yeah, look at the Y." I was like, "Why? Like it's a Y. Cool. You doing the YMCA?" And you were like, "No, it was for the division." I'm like, the only letter I'm used to seeing next to my team's name is the letter E. 13 straight years of it now, so hopefully maybe we can turn it. I'll take an X, man. At this point, I'll take an X. Oh, we've got enough E's to go around here, but now let's stick with Vancouver. And I mean, you could turn that Y into a Z, but do you want to? I mean, let's just take a look at the potential opponents for you, right? We know you're not going to run into Edmonton in the first round, which thank goodness, right? That's nice. That would be a buzzsaw, I think, waiting to happen.
But to be fair, we've swept them in the season series.
Okay, that's fair. I just hate to see what McDavid would do in the regular season, knowing he got swept, or in the postseason, knowing he got swept in the regular season. He's already electric. He's even more electric in the postseason. But thankfully, you guys don't have to be his first victim. And to be honest, I guess he doesn't have the best playoff series record. But the three teams that Vancouver could come up against, most likely the Nashville Predators as things stand right now, but very well could be the Golden Knights or even the LA Kings. Out of those three teams, who are you most comfortable beating and who are you most afraid of?
Yeah, I think universally you'll see among Canucks fans, we're most comfortable facing the Nashville Predators. Obviously, they've got great pieces. Philip Forsberg's on a heater. UC Saros is an elite-level goaltender. Roman Josi is an amazing defenseman. They've definitely got pieces, and they've got depth. But when you look at them compared to both the Kings and the Golden Knights, I think they're the least scary. They're the team with the least upside, the least kind of veteran Stanley Cup winning presence, and I think they're just the least scary. You look at them, they're a slightly above average team when it comes to scoring goals this season, and they're slightly below average when it comes to getting scored on. So a bang average team, the Canucks have been pretty damn good at scoring goals, and with Demko back, they'll be really good at preventing them as well. So I think we match up very well against the Predators. If we want to talk about the cheating, scamming, LTR bums, the Golden Knights, you just look at their additions, Hurdle, you look at Hannafin, you look at, so they got Mark Stone stashed on LTIR coming off. Like, this is just a very scary team that just went and won the cup pretty recently. So I think that's definitely a team that there's some fear there, because again, we don't know how long it's going to take for Mark Stone to get up to standard, but I think it was Kucherov a few years ago with the Lightning, I believe. I don't know if it was Kucherov or Stamkos, who was on LTIR almost all season. Then in the playoffs is bloody point per game. It's just, you never know with these guys, and I think Vegas is a very scary team. Again, you look at their goaltending, not super, super impressive. They've had good seasons for sure, but you look at the names, they're not the biggest names like Saros.
But they won a cup with a guy like Adin Hill, right? So you can't really knock it because he's not got a name. I mean, his name's on the Stanley Cup, so it's got to be good enough, right?
Exactly. I think it's kind of similar thing with the Kings, where you still have a lot of young talent, but you also have veterans in Doughty and Kopitar and even Danault who have been to the dance before, who have that experience and will be particularly good in the playoffs. And Cam Talbot's not no Saros, but Cam Talbot's a veteran goaltender who, as we saw with Adin Hill last year, any goaltender can heat up and win a couple series. So when I look at kind of their overall team makeup versus Nashville's team makeup, I think I'm on kind of wanting to face Nashville. I think if I were to order it, I'd most want to face Nashville, then the Kings, then the Golden Knights. And perhaps I'm overestimating the Golden Knights. They're probably just barely sneaking into the wild card for a reason. But I think we'd be most comfortable facing the Predators. I believe they're a 4-5-1 in their last 10 that I last checked as well. So they're not exactly hot. They kind of had that big. I think you mentioned it earlier, Ryan, before we were started the podcast. Was they kind of went on that heater after their trip got canceled. Their little Vegas trip. And they were on that heater, but since then they've kind of cooled down. It's kind of like how the Canucks were on that heater, kind of earlier in the season, then they kind of cooled down, and now I think they're starting to kind of round into form again. Now that Demko's back, now all their injured players are back. Kind of that same thing, but while Nashville's kind of on this cold streak, I think that's the right time to take them on and eliminate them, and kind of hopefully do that in shorter fashion to buy us some time and rest and avoid injuries for whoever comes next, who will probably end up being a pretty strong opponent.
Yeah, I think if I had to push come to shove rank them like you did, I think I agree entirely. Nashville's the team I'm most wanting to face. Not that there's ever really going to be a true easy matchup, unless you're the 1 seed in the East. The Rangers should absolutely dumpster Washington. I don't see any way Washington. I mean, hell, if they score a goal per game, I'd be impressed. They just don't match up well at all. Ovi's way past his expiration date and is here because he's chasing Gretzky. That's about it. I mean, the Sabres just bodied them and got under their skin just like a week ago. Like, come on, guys. Our season was over, and like they were dreadful, and they are lucky that Philadelphia had to pull the goalie. Otherwise, I don't think they would have gotten in. I think, I mean, they played terribly against Philadelphia, and neither team played great in that game. You could tell it was, hey, we know we win this game and there's a chance we make the playoffs, right? For both of them, you could see it in the way they played. But man, anyway, this isn't about Washington. This is about the 3 teams you could face. And I think if I was going to break it down, just something very, very basic and simple that you can think about if you're a Canucks fan, you're not sure exactly what you're looking at here. I think the LA Kings are a team with a really strong amount of depth and questionable goaltending. I think you look at the Nashville Predators as a team with some really big stars and great goaltending, but they really, really lack depth. And I would look at Vegas and say, if they're all playing up to snuff, that's a very deep team with 2 quality goaltenders. So I think Vegas out of the 3 of those teams is the best, followed by the Kings, followed by the Predators, which is why I would want to play the Predators. But then again, I was going to kind of counter your statement about wanting to play the Predators in the fact that UC Saros is definitely the best goalie out of either 3 of those teams, right? He is by far and away the best goalie, and he's probably a top 10 goalie in the league, if not better, right? He's definitely a guy we saw with Shesterkin with the Rangers just a couple seasons ago, where he just got hot and carried him to the conference finals. Now, I don't think Nashville's got enough talent to get to the conference finals like the Rangers did, but a hot goalie can win a series and make an upset, and then all of a sudden Edmonton's there in round 2, like, cool guys, I guess we get a nice little run to the conference finals, right? Not having to work too hard. But the Vegas Edmonton series, I think, is going to be very intriguing. I'm very, very excited about that one, but I'm more so excited to watch the Canucks. If only your games weren't on so damn late. I'm gonna have to be so tired on some of these mornings, but I gotta watch you guys. You guys, honestly, like I said, I've been out there with the banner every day trying to pump up the Canucks. I told you back in like December, January, that you guys had nothing to worry about and that you were probably gonna end up winning the division or at least make the playoffs. I know you at one point were like, well, let's pump the brakes. We got to make the playoffs first. And you're doing the good corporate line thing there, but come on, man. Like, so that leads me to my next question, right? You company line, boss isn't listening. What are you saying is the expectation in Vancouver right now, in Canucks Nation? I don't know what do you guys? We're the Saberhood, but I don't know what you guys call yourself.
Saberhood's a pretty dope name. Yeah, Next Nation. I think that's probably right. Next Nation sounds right.
Okay.
I'd like. We definitely got to win round 1. I think that's absolute. I think a lot of people are just happy to be in the playoffs, right? But I think if we lost round 1, people would be pretty upset. So I'd say kind of the conservative goal will be to get to round 2. I think the regular, like, kind of standard goal will be round 3, and the stretch goal, of course, to get back to the finals. But again, I don't think anyone's expecting to get back to the finals. I think what people are really hoping for is a competitive round conference final kind of thing. Yeah.
I think it all could go out the window too, right? You look at, say, Edmonton sweeps Vegas and you guys, win in 6 against Nashville, right? I mean, all of a sudden it's like, man, Edmonton's rolling high, and if you guys lose in game 6 or 7 to Edmonton, I really think the way the season will be judged will be based on how round 2 goes, because I'm already putting you guys through round 1. Like, if you guys lose in round 1, like you said, there should be some serious questions, and it's just going to be like, what is going on? But with round 2, it's one of those, okay, now you're playing some really, really strong teams. And I think if any team that was the higher seed makes it to round 2, they have a chance at winning the cup. I think it's just as simple as that, right? You look at the LA Kings and they knock off Dallas, right, in round 1. Do we really think that the LA Kings have it in them to make a run all the way? Right? Maybe Tampa Bay knocks off the Florida Panthers, the Battle of Florida, right? Do we really think Tampa Bay is going to run to the cup again?
You know what? That's a conversation we can have later. I think they're a dark horse.
Yeah, we will touch on the rest of the playoff field a little bit later. But in my opinion, I just think that the top team or 2 in the division should be considered favorites. Now, listen, is that to say that if Colorado knocks off Winnipeg, I don't think they have it in them to make it to the cup? No, but I just think that then they would probably be running into Dallas, but then it's a situation of who won that series, right? And I think that's the big thing for Vancouver. You got the easiest matchups, right? Because you won the division. You did your job during the regular season. You weathered the storms of the good and the bad, and you made it, right? 8-5-2 in your last 13 here since we last spoke. I mean, you guys have been great. The goals for and goals against, not quite been there, but now with Demko back in the action, get him back up to speed, get rolling there, get him back to the way he was playing. We were talking about, can Demko play all these games? And it's a good thing you have DeSmith because he doesn't have to. Well, he just missed a month and a half. My fantasy team really did not appreciate that. Still won the championship, by the way, but my fantasy team was not thrilled. Thank you. About Demko's disappearance. But really, I think you get him back up to speed, up and running, and you guys, I mean, like we said, Saros is capable of stealing a series. We know sure as heck that Thatcher Demko is capable of stealing a series or 2 or 3.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think we saw in the bubble, it was a very fresh Demko. He almost stole that Vegas series, left Vegas shell-shocked, where Vegas ended up losing that next round, I think partially because I think it was Shea Theodore was the only Golden Knight to score on Demko that entire series. And I think heading into this, we've last 2 games the Canucks have looked really sharp against both Calgary and Edmonton. Edmonton, no McDavid for them, but obviously no Demko for the Canucks. DeSmith and net, and DeSmith was very, very good. And the Canucks in general seemed to shut things down pretty well. And that was the game they had to win to make sure that they got the division. Essentially, they didn't clinch the division with that one, but essentially clinched it. And then the most recent one against Calgary was the one that actually clinched it. And I think, again, the Canucks played a complete game. Demko's first game back, obviously. It'll be interesting to see if he plays the next game, now that they've clinched the division. Just because it's kind of 2 schools of thought, right? Demko's off of an injury and kind of needs to tune up to head into the playoffs. Or do you protect him from injury and play either DeSmith or Seelov's, probably DeSmith. I think Seelov's got sent down, so DeSmith in that final game, again, just for the sake of yes, it'd be nice to give Demko a tune-up, but is it more important to think about the future? And maybe even if Demko's a little rustier in the beginning of game 1, it seems like he'll probably end up catching up to it. That's kind of the decision now. And personally, I would probably and this is going to sound like an edgy answer, I'd play him for the first 2 periods. Just to give him a little tune-up and then put in the backup.
I think that's really intriguing, right? I think if you play the game worried about injury for a guy who I wouldn't say is considered injury prone, those guys that step on the ice and there seem to be banana peels all over the place for him, right? I don't think you can play with the worry of injury in your mind. You just got to play if he's 100% and he is healthy. he should be out there. And I think getting him tuned up is more important than, oh no, what if he gets hurt? Like, okay, maybe the rustiness is another reason. Maybe he pulls his hamstring because he's rusty, knock on wood. But yes, everybody just pulled over onto the side of the road and knocked in the wood in their car in Vancouver. So no, I think, Demko obviously is a guy that you guys need, right? We've seen the difference that he can make to your team, right? You went from President's Trophy team to division fight pretty quickly, right? And obviously that's some of the ups and downs of the season too, but it's not all on Demko. But at the same time, like, Demko makes a big difference. And yes, you guys are still like 6th overall in the league. Yeah, 5th overall in the league, tied with Boston. So right, it wasn't that big of a difference, but the Rangers are 5 points ahead of you guys at that 69% points percentage. You guys, does make a difference. But other than Demko, who else are you circling come playoff time? Don't give me the big names. Give me somebody that, when we know the stars are going to show up, or they need to anyway, and obviously if they don't, what's the point of having this conversation? But in the playoffs, it's never just the stars. Somebody's star is made in the playoffs. Who in the blue and green is going to have their star made this postseason?
You know what? I'll do you one better. Let's do this like you would at the end of a hockey night in Canada. I'll give you the 3 stars. 3 being kind of the more obvious candidates, and then 1 kind of being like more the breakouts. 3rd star, and this is going to be a hot take, I'm going to say Tyler Myers.
Yo, did you know?
Chaos Giraffe.
Fun fact. He is the only active NHL player that has played a playoff game for the Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah, I saw a different graphic. I was going to wait to bring it up, but another defenseman on the Canucks, Hronek, I think has played the 8th most amount of regular season games without playing a playoff game. Would you like to guess who 1 and 3 on that list are?
Jeff Skinner and Zemgus Girgensons.
Ding, 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 yep.
Jeff Skinner's played 1,006 career games and has not made the playoffs. It's absolutely absurd.
Yeah. So that's tough. I think a wonderful chirp from the Calgary game as well. There was a bit of a scrap, and I think one of the Flames players kind of dove, but basically Höglander cross-checked them in the chest, and he like sent his head flying back. So this is, I know a lot of people are kind of iffy on the reviews of major penalties, but this is one of the times I'm very thankful there was a review, because Höglander got 5 for cross-checking when he didn't even hit in the head, so they ended up reviewing it and bringing it down to a 2. But while they were reviewing it, they chose to go to a hot mic on the ice, and Hronek wanted to remind the Flames that in a couple weeks they're going to be on vacation. So that's it was a very good chirp. I don't have Hronek's accent, and I don't even want to try to attempt to do Hronek's accent, but very funny chirp, and I'm sure it's nice for Hronek, after 300 something games. I think it's like 6-7 seasons of the Wings, finally being kind of like the tail end after Kenny Holland's kind of long dynasty of making the playoffs, being on the tail end of that, where you just kind of have like, it's like when you have a nuclear power plant and then they leave and it's just a toxic sludge left afterwards. He was there for the toxic sludge, and now finally he gets to move away into the nice country land and be able to enjoy. So I'm very happy for Hronek, and obviously happy for the Canucks in general, but I think Tyler Myers is someone he's known as the Chaos Giraffe. So Giraffe, obviously, because he's tall and lanky, but Chaos because he causes both very good things to happen on the ice. I mean, he's had a very good offensive season this year, and some very bad things on the ice. As he's known for his defensive breakdowns and giveaways. I think under Tocchet, and with the help of Gonchar and Foote, the assistant coaches, he's kind of found a level of betterness, and I think I love the Twin Towers pairing of him and Zadorov, but I think he's going to have a good playoffs. I think we're going to definitely see some mistakes from him, but I think we're going to see more good than bad. And I feel like a lot of people kind of crap on Myers just for the sake that he is Myers and he has his reputation of being a bit of a klutz, right? But I think he's going to have a good playoff. So he's my 3rd star.
He is.
My
Speaking of, sorry, you call him the chaos giraffe. The analytics back that up. Money Puck has this really great thing. If you go to teams and then you scroll beneath the table and you look at the individual teams, you can click on them and you can kind of make your own graph. Well, on the on ice expected goals, yeah, he's in the fun category, which there's a bad, there's a fun, there's a good, and there's a boring. You can guess what fun means, is that everything is happening. Good
high event
is
hockey.
Yep, high event hockey, man. I loved when the Sabres played high event hockey. That was a good time. Anyway, we'll focus on your number 2. Tyler Myers, Mr. Chaos Giraffe, is number 3. Number 2.
I was gonna say, actually, it makes sense. You liked when the Sabres played high event hockey. Myers, the former Sabres, matches up.
Yep.
Number 2. He's someone you've flown the flag for pretty hard. Connor Garland, particularly heating up at the latter half of the season. Kind of him and Dakota Joshua have kind of been a pairing. I think Connor Garland is someone who's very, very underrated. Small guy, short guy, but he really battles with more than his weight. He wins a lot of puck battles, and I think he has the ability to score some clutch goals for this team. He was around in kind of that bubble playoffs year. I think it's almost like a fever dream where Arizona, I think, had Taylor Hall and Phil Kessel at the same time in the bubble. I'm just a hazy remembrance. And I think Garland was on the third line of that team as well. And he was very effective. So I think Garland is one of those pieces who can play on any line and will be effective, right? We saw him on the best third line in the NHL. We saw him in the top 6. Wherever he goes, he's effective. He's been really good with Miller recently. So I think he could be an X factor in certain series, and I see him getting at least, if the Canucks go far, getting at least a couple of game-winning goals along that path.
Oh, I lied. I'm so happy you brought up Connor Garland. Oh my God. Literally, he's the kind of player the Buffalo Sabres need this offseason. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but I'm messing around on the Money Puck chart, and it's like every single chart I build, it's like, who's the furthest one in the amazing category? It's Connor Garland. He's good on the ice, off the ice. He's good at scoring goals. He's good at preventing goals. It's like, he's like your best player when he's on the ice versus when he's off the ice. So I'm not going to go out on a limb and say he's the best player on the Canucks, but he's certainly got some of the best impacts when he's out there.
Yeah. No, again, like you said, he's definitely not like the flashiest or the best player out there, but he's definitely a needle mover. Having him on your team is kind of what takes you from that next level of, oh, we're kind of a fringe playoff team, so yeah, we're a solid playoff team with depth like that. Very happy we did not move on from him in the off season. Just going to throw that out there. But yeah, I think moving on to our first star. Now this is a tough one, right? Because again, Connor Garland's a great impact player. Tyler Myers, you think about it. If we take out the obvious players, obviously Quinn Hughes, JT Miller, Demko, those are kind of the obvious ones. I think who I land on is Dakota Joshua, who really plays that kind of style of hockey and has really shown off his hockey IQ, I think, this season. 18 goals, and he would have hit 20 goals if he didn't get injured. I think he plays in the dirty areas. He can forecheck. And we saw kind of when Dakota Joshua was out, the Canucks seemed to struggle quite a bit. And when he came back, I don't think it's a coincidence the Canucks started playing better. Dakota Joshua is someone who's also kind of, him and Garland have worked as a really good winger tandem. And I think you can put whoever in the middle and they'll play well. And again, you can play them on the third line with Bluger in the middle. You can play them on the second line with Miller in the middle. It's just very, very versatile player Dakota Joshua is. He can play power play. He can play penalty kill. I think he'll be crucial to the Canucks' kind of success in the playoffs. And again, physical guy as well, which is exactly the brand you play in the playoffs. So Dakota Joshua would be my number one expected kind of X factor for the playoffs. That's not the obvious.
I love it, man. These are some great names, and you know what? I'm sitting over here with my charts, and I agree. I agree with your assessment of everybody, right? So clearly, the eye test matches the analytics. We talked about on ice expected goals for and on ice expected goals against. The good category is low against, high for. Connor Garland's your best player there. Dakota Joshua also fits in this bucket. I will say there are three more forwards in this bucket.
Whoa.
Can you name the 3 other forwards in this bucket?
Obvious one seems like JT Miller.
No, he is in the fun bucket. So there's a lot of expected goals against and a lot of expected goals for when he's on the ice.
Okay, let's go with someone a little more subtle and Pius Suter.
Pius Suter is just in there. He is way down there, right? He's really good on ice expected goals against. Not quite as good in the on ice expected goals for. He's just across the line, but better defensive impact than offense, but he's still in that really good bucket where you want to be.
Okay. So that's one. Let's think. Who else could it be? I'm gonna go ahead. This guy could totally end up being in the fun category, but I want to see Nils Höglander.
Nils Höglander is firmly in that bucket. You're 2 for 2 on your guesses, I think, right?
Yeah. Oh, 2 for 3. I guess Miller.
Oh, that's right. 2 for 3. Can we make it 3 for 4?
Yes, I will also say Höglander would be my honorable mention. He also plays that kind of physical style. He's got 24 goals this year. Good breakout season for him. He's really found a home on that first line with Pettersson. So just point that out. Let's think. So it could be Bluger. It could be Pettersson. I'm totally sleeping on Pettersson here. So Bluger, Pettersson is kind of who comes to mind. Elias Lindholm, I know, hasn't necessarily been the best analytically, so I'm going to go ahead and rule him out.
Good, because he's in the very bad category. He is your second worst forward.
Oof. I'm trying to think. I think I'd like to lock in Elias Pettersson.
Oh, so close. Your other guy is the guy. It is Teddy Bluger. But Pettersson is good, right? He's fun. Yeah. He's less than Besser and Miller, who are above him and expected goals against being like a lot more. But Pettersson is, if he ups his defensive game. But no, it's Teddy Bluger, Connor Garland. Those are
the third line.
I'm telling you, man, I love that third line. And you bring up a point there about Dakota Joshua. He, what was he playing on that third line, right? You mentioned that.
Yes. Again, like him and Garland have kind of been moving up. So I think recently they've been playing with Miller now on the second line. But originally that third line was that Bluger, Joshua, Garland group. Yeah, and I think that third line, it's a third line forward, right? Like, oh man, our whole team rests on the balance of a third line forward, and it's a little bit too simplistic to say that, but it reminds me of a situation here in Buffalo where we missed Jack Quinn for the majority of the season, and it was no surprise that when he came back, then left again, then came back, that it kind of, the Sabres season did one of those dip when he was in the lineup, and I'm like, Jack Quinn is not Connor McDavid. Jack Quinn is not making, Jack Quinn's not scoring 50% of our goals when he's out there, but you get everybody in the right place where they fit, where they have chemistry, complementary styles. And it's amazing what happens, and just missing one of those pieces, I think, is pretty big. So shout out to your third line. I'm excited to watch the third line. Pettersson can just get benched for all I care. I don't want to see him out there. I want to see Teddy Bluger.
Oh wow, so you're really good defenseman. Love the high event stuff, by the way. I figured I might as well flip to the defenseman. Just give you this quickly so we can move on to another topic here. But we mentioned Myers is in that fun category. Hronek and Hughes both sit in that fun category, so look out for that.
No surprise.
Cole and Friedman are in the good category. And in the boring category, which is nothing happens for you, but nothing happens against you, are Zadorov, Soucy, and Juleson. Nobody is in the bad category, which is really good to see.
What a change. Oh my God. Half our defense would have been in the bad category a couple of years ago. So that's nice.
Last season, Tyler Myers was in that bad category. So
I'm sure Riley Stillman.
He didn't qualify. It's a minimum of 20 games played. So
I see. Our glorious tank commander didn't get in there. I see. But yeah, it's you just look at this team this year. Like you said, there's a lot of guys in the fun category, a couple guys in the good category. But it's a good balance, like not too many guys in the. I think we said 2 forwards in the bad. I think you said.
Yes, I believe there were. Hold on, I can get back to that. I can get you the exact answer.
Yeah, no worries.
There were 3. Lafferty, Lindholm, and DiGiuseppe.
DiGiuseppe's a scratch right now. That's totally okay. Lindholm,
he is your worst forward. If DiGiuseppe's scratched, Lindholm is your worst forward.
Oh boy. I think it's a big fit thing, right? Like, I think you look at Lindholm's advanced analytics. I think his penalty kill percentage actually went up, or his the percentage, if you look at the money puck, where it's like offense, defense, power play, penalties, or whatever, I think his PK went up. He's been a little better on the PK. Everything else has gone down, which is honestly fine. He went from being a first line forward to a third line forward. Obviously, you'd like to see the analytics be a little better on a third line that's been so good, but I think it's all right. Kuzmenko is doing spectacular for Calgary, and I'm very happy for him. I hope he gets paid, ideally by Calgary, and then they can't afford other people.
That would be ideal for you guys. But honestly, I'm just excited to see this. I think if I had to point out a weakness, it's probably Lindholm, right? He's gonna get minutes in the playoffs. He's got a name, right? We'll see if Tocchet can just, like, you know, it's hard to decouple the name from the performance, and it's a reason that Rasmus Ristolainen got so many minutes over the years, despite being dreadful. And you know, with that said, shall we move on to the Sabres? Did you have one more thing about the Canucks?
I had one more thing. I totally forgot. I remembered it, wanted to say it, forgot it, remembered it again. It's actually from a press conference we talk about the third line. You were talking about Jack Quinn joining it. It actually makes total sense, and I'll explain why. So normally on a team, right, you have your top six that's built for offense. You also have two defensive pairings that are usually pretty good. Usually your top pairing is your best pairing, and your second pairing is usually pretty damn good as well. So you match up your first pairing with their first line, and your second pairing with their second line. And obviously you switch it around here and there, but generally you want to make sure one of those two pairings is out there against their best players. When you have a third line that's also kind of strong, it forces them to have to give them good matchups. And this is something Tocchet talked about. When you have a good third line, that good third line is going to have good matchups. So he was the assistant coach under the HBK line, Hagelin, Kessel, Bonino, during the Penguins Cup years. That line was so deadly because you just can't put out your top pairing against them because Crosby and Malkin are right there. You have to give them the better matchup, and they're the ones who are going to punish you. And if you decide, no, screw it, no, they're the ones scoring, we're going to put out our top defenseman against them, now Crosby's up against third pairing bums, like, or even if they're not bums, regular third pairing defenseman against Crosby, it's killer. So I think that's where the true value of the third line is it makes it a matchup nightmare for the opposing team, and you have to have a really good coach and really fluid defensive pairings to be able to match up with it, and you're really putting the onus on the other team to be able to adapt to you. So that's kind of what we talk about where, you know, you guys added Jack Quinn, and all of a sudden everything's clicking. It's because you kind of brought up the value of that third line, and now they're facing worse opponents, and they're able to do a better job. Same thing with the Canucks. Dakota Joshua, Connor Garland, and Teddy Bluger were able to be so deadly because they had to put other teams had to put their best defensemen against Pettersson and Miller. So that kind of opened things up for them, and I think that's exactly how things will be in the playoffs as well, especially as injuries and stuff occur. If the Canucks third line remains strong and there's injuries in the back end for other teams, it's going to pile on them really quickly with a strong third line.
Yeah, and it's just the depth aspect, right? We talk about these teams that make the playoffs due to their top talent, like a Nashville Predators, right? That depth being able to throw anybody out there in any matchup and really cause headaches for the opposing coach. That's why I like the Canucks so much this year. I think you guys are deep. We'll have to see if Pettersson and Hughes and Hronik and all those guys and Besser, they come to play. If they do, could be having a fun time on this podcast, man. I'm glad at least one of our teams is doing well. I appreciate it. But now that we've talked about the good, let's go to the bad. And the Buffalo Sabres season is over. 13 straight years without the playoffs. I mean, there's kids that are born, you know, what is it, like 2000? If you were born in 2011, yeah, they're 13. They're in high school, and they have never seen the Sabres make the playoffs.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, middle schoolers and high schoolers don't know playoff hockey here in Buffalo. And you know what? I will say this, just something I want to get off my chest, is I really implore you, if you're a Sabres fan and you're just trying to explore a bit of content, please watch the playoffs intently. Don't just turn them on. Don't just be at a bar and be like, oh, look, the game's on. Oh, look, somebody scored. Let me watch the highlights. No. Sit down. Just watch a period, because this is going to be how hockey should be played. And I feel like that's something that we've almost forgotten here in Buffalo, is how hockey should be played. And what it's led to is a lot of loud voices asking for us to go back to the 90s when we previously had success, right? And nobody's talking about going back to 2006-07. Everyone's jumping all the way back to the 90s when we went to the Cup and whatnot. And okay, most of that was probably Hasek, but They want grit. They want just hitting. They want physicality. And I'm like, the game's not really played like that anymore. Like, you'll see players that aren't meant to be hitting, like McKinnon, throw his weight around in the playoffs, and it's about getting those guys to do it. And I think that's ultimately where Don Granato, who was fired, guys, if you wanted my deep dive into the Don Granato firing, check out the podcast I just dropped yesterday.
Highly recommend it.
45 minutes of me just talking about the Don Granato era, right? And we can't sit here and say it's all bad, but ultimately at the end of the day, he didn't get the players to do what they needed to do. He didn't get them to play playoff hockey. And I think we need to see what playoff hockey looks like. And as fans, that should be our expectation. Now, I think we've done well with our expectations, but I think there's too many loud, maybe minority that wants us to get. The reason we didn't make it is because we didn't hit enough. So I just want to put that out there. That's not why we didn't make the playoffs.
Definitely. Yeah. I think your analysis there is astute. And again, as I said, highly recommend you check out Ryan's video. Just kind of the 45-minute kind of breakdown of this. But you look at Don Granato, and I think there's different types of coaches, right? There's coaches that, you kind of are playoff oriented. You have coaches that are kind of good for regular season success. And then you have kind of, for a lack of a better word, bum shitter coaches who just kind of suck. And then you have development coaches. I think Don Granato is one of those development coaches. He's done some good things for these Sabres. He's brought them to, a good level where, those young guys are starting to get better. You look at Jack Quinn, like you mentioned, kind of these younger players, they've gotten better.
Heck, Tage Thompson. I mean, you can't look any further. No, literally nobody expected Tage Thompson to score 40 goals in his career and be a number one center and be a star in the NHL. Like, we all saw Dahlin doing it, right? Dahlin still has elevated his game under Granato, but nobody saw guys like Tage doing that. Tuck was looked at as a middle sixer. Now he's a bona fide first line winger with some physicality, right? You look at these guys that have taken the next step. Heck, JJ Peterka. Maybe you could say you saw this. I know. I'm like, maybe you could say you saw that one coming because of his draft pedigree, right? Early second rounder. Many thought he should go in the late first. Lots of talent there, right? But to be this early in his career, I think he's, 3 years removed from his draft year. Like, for him to be playing on the first line and being a big reason the first line found its footing, I don't think, you can just say, oh, Granato had nothing to do with it. He just lucked into that. It's not like he got Crosby and Malkin and then just kind of wound his way behind the bench and was like, oh, let's go, right? Like, some of that's got to be on the coaching staff too. But ultimately, I thought that the bad outweighed the good, especially this season. And, like I said, I've talked about this ad nauseum. I'd like to get your thoughts on the firing and why now, and should they have stuck with it? Did last year give you any confidence that this year was a fluke, or was last year the fluke? And what are you thinking? What was your reaction when you saw the news?
Yeah, I think Granato reminded me quite a bit of Travis Green with the Canucks as well. Travis Green was someone who took over after, I believe it was Willie Desjardins, who was not a very good coach, and kind of he was coming up from Abbotsford, or I think at the time it was Utica, our farm team, and he was pretty good. We looked at him and he was doing things pretty well, but he really didn't take the Canucks to that next level. I think that's when we kind of made the switch to it was Bruce Boudreau who came next, and he kind of again helped the Canucks get that high octane offense, helped Kuzmenko get almost 40 goals. Again, he kind of brought that confidence and swagger to the Canucks, and then. Again, the whole point of each firing of these coaches was that they didn't get they were good coaches. Like, Bruce Boudreau's a great coach. Like, the Canucks fans loved him. The players loved him. You could tell that from the Bruce there it is chants. It's still a thing, Bruce Boudreau's been, I think, done a couple of things with the WWE where he goes and sees, like, Kevin Owens or whatever, and there's always references to it, or, like, there's some TSN bits about it. It's very obvious Boudreau was a good coach, and he was well-liked. But just because he was a good coach and well-liked doesn't mean he was right for that situation. I think Don Granato is a good coach, but he's not a good coach for these Sabres right now. Again, what they need is exactly what the Canucks got out of Tocchet. If you looked at it last year, Tocchet was making them do basic minor hockey league drills because they were not doing what Tocchet wanted. He wanted them to have structure and defensive buy-in and all this stuff, and they were coming off high-octane Bruce Boudreau, go score lots of goals in high-event hockey. And Tocchet was like, no, we're going to be defensively responsible. We're going to have a system. And if we're not going to do this, I think it was the second weekend, we're going to do basic minor hockey league drills where you guys learn how to pass and how to do all this basic stuff, right? And it was the perfect fit. I think Taka is the perfect kind of, not mold, but kind of the vision of what a good coach can do for a team that seemingly has talent. Because if you look at the Canucks previously, they were a good team. Yes, we added Hronik. Yes, we added Susie. Yes, we added Lafferty and a couple other players, and DeSmith. But the core talent of this team was already here, right? Garland, Joshua, Pedersen, Miller, Besser, Hughes. All these guys were already here. Demko. They were already here, and they were just nowhere near this level of success because they didn't have the right coaching. And I think that's where you have the potential where you replace Granato, who just did not bring that same, again, kind of same thing as Willie, if you look at Bruce Boudreau, or if you look at Travis Green, good coaches overall, but just not the right fit for the Sabres now. They have the potential to bring someone in who can kind of guide them to that next level, where I think Granato tried to do it, where to have them play defensively responsible, but it backfired because he didn't do it in the right way. And I think with the right coach, with the playoff pedigree, you can really train those Sabres to, again, have that defense, but keep that high octane offense, that high event hockey that you love to see, Ryan. Having that still be the main component of their game, but just throwing in the right habits, the right things, and building around their strengths rather than trying to patch up their weaknesses at the cost of sacrificing half their strengths and just ending up mid.
Yeah, and you mentioned that look at the Canucks. It's like, yes, the high event hockey's still there in Vancouver. Like, you still have guys in that fun category, right?
Yeah.
But the team is sitting in that good category, and that's where you need to be overall. And I said this on the other episode, but so those of you that listen to this, you're going to hear me repeat myself quite a bit, but they just are my thoughts on the whole situation. But with Don Granato, it was too much one or the other. He couldn't figure out a way to blend last year's offense with this year's defense, which I guess was an improvement. Ultimately, like, it did improve, but it did not improve more than the offense regressed, right? So it was a bit of this or that approach, and you just can't have that, especially with a team that was expected to finally break the playoff drought. And I like what you're saying about the coaches, right? If you guys want to get swept in the first round and fire Tocchet, I'd be cool with that. Because he can come coach us.
Hey, you're supposed to be a Canucks fan right now, buddy. Hey, they turned real quick.
I'm still a Sabres fan through and through. Don't get me wrong, but obviously I want to see you guys have success. I'm just kidding. But there are plenty of candidates out there that I think fit the mold of what you're saying. And you know what? What was really encouraging to hear about Kevin Adams' press conference, and some of the reports afterwards are he wants a head coach with previous head coaching experience. And, so I know a lot of Sabres fans are dying for Michael Pekka or some of the former players. You want Lindy back too. He got experience. But I think it needs to be a fresh voice. And I think he just needs to, my criteria was somebody with experience behind the bench and that has coached 2 playoff series. Obviously,
that's interesting.
They have to mesh with the players we have, right? You can't take a coach meant for the Islanders and put him behind the bench of the Sabres and expect that to work unless they're a good enough coach to adapt their style to the players they have, right? There's those coaches that can play whatever style is required. Maybe that's the guy, but not somebody that says, I need to play lockdown defense, block pucks, like hit a ton, right? That's not the team that we've put together. So don't try and force the square peg into the round hole.
So is that what you think Lindy Ruff is? Why wouldn't you want Lindy Ruff?
I think it's just time for a fresh voice. I mean, Lindy's been great for us, and he's been good anywhere he's gone. But at the same time, I think it's probably just time to get a fresh voice. I mean, you look at Lindy Ruff's coaching career after Buffalo. He went to Dallas, where he had 91 points, 92 points, 109 points, and then 79, and he was fired after that season, right? So he made 2 playoff appearances, won 1 series in that time. So he had 3 chances, went 1 for 3 in the postseason. Now, that was the Dallas team of the 16-17, right? that team that he took to get 109 points. You know, it was Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, Jason Spezza, John Klingberg, Patrick Sharp, Hemsky, Goligoski, all those guys, right? Cody Eakin. And then you see him go to New Jersey. And I don't think that it's like, right, I think Lindy's a great coach. I'm ready for something new. Right? I think Lindy Ruff can absolutely coach a young, fast, thrilling hockey team. He did it last season with the Devils, right? Yeah. And then he basically got thrown under the bus because management sat on their hands and did diddly at the goaltender position. They let Damon Severson leave, and he wasn't playing particularly tough minutes, but he crushed the light minutes he got. I said this yesterday, but management never replaced that kind of guy. They thought Luke Hughes was great, but you needed that kind of guy to replace Severson. And then they also brought, Vitek Vanacek, who's been an adequate backup in his career, and he's not your solution, right? Like Akira Schmid was not the answer this season, right? You didn't do anything. You didn't give Lindy a goalie. Jack Hughes was out for a while. I think it was just somebody had to fall on the sword, and it was Lindy Ruff. So I think he can absolutely still coach in this league. And, you know, spoiler alert, but he's on my list of potential candidates that I will get your opinion on in a minute.
Lovely.
But at this point, I'm just ready for something fresh, something new, something different, right? It's kind of a Buffalo thing to lean too much into the past, right? That's why we're talking about Jay McKee and Michael Pekka and all those guys that are now assistants that we can potentially bring back. And people wanted Mike Greer when before he went to San Jose, right? It's like, oh boy, let their time be their time. It's like, let's make a new era. Too much of Buffalo just, wallows in the past and just thinks about all the things that were and the good times. It's like, I don't want Lindy's reputation to be tarnished, right? He comes in, team does worse. That's going to be a tough one, you know? Yeah. So, but we've talked about the coaches. We'll talk about coaching search in a minute, but while we're on the topic of teams, what, in your opinion, do the Sabres need to address besides finding the right head coach this offseason?
Here's the thing. I don't think the Sabres need too much. I think you just build up the depth a little bit. Kind of, again, you look at the Canucks, what they added. I don't want to go back to the Canucks again, but kind of those depth pieces, those third liners, people who can kind of move up and line up if need be. You look at the talent on the Sabres, right, with people like Tage Thompson, Alex Tuch, Rasmus Dahlin, development of players like Owen Power, JJ Peterka, Jack Quinn, Zach Benson. They should be able to fill in most of their holes on their own. It's more about kind of finding those reliable players. Again, you look at the Canucks, I think Zadorov is a perfect example of someone who's just reliable. Garland, reliable. Joshua, reliable. Even Höglander, to some degree, reliable. And taking those players and kind of getting them to buy in defensively so that the rest of the team buys in defensively and that they're able to play not even necessarily a physical brand of hockey, but kind of like what you talked about with McKinnon, playing their game with a little bit more edge. That's all that needs to happen. So I think a couple of minor acquisitions that are just the right character are all that the Sabres need. Again, assuming that UPL can even keep some of the form he had this season, it looks like he'll be just fine in the net. And if Devin Levi can kind of get his game together to give you options, kind of that Luongo-Schneider-esque tandem. I don't want to compare UPL to probably one of the top 3 goalies to ever play the game.
I'd love that. But, I wouldn't complain.
I bet you wouldn't. Yeah, no, just comparing UPL to someone to basically what if he panned out to that the greatest goalie in Sabres history, which is saying a lot considering you guys have had Ryan Miller.
That's a tough battle. Like if he ever got there, I'd love to have that debate on this podcast with you, man. That would be so much fun.
Oh yeah, 100%. But if UPL returns form and you get that even average backup, I think this team can make the playoffs next year. And I'm sure you've heard that plenty of times over the last 13 years. But I think they're just the right coach and a couple pieces away.
And I agree with you. By the way, the Sabres did not finish dead last in the NHL in hits this season. They finished 21st. So, boom.
That's actually a lot better than I expected.
Yeah. Do you know who finished in last?
How's Columbus on that list?
They're third last. I'm impressed. I didn't think you were going to come anywhere close because the bottom 2 teams, Carolina Hurricanes and Dallas Stars. Clearly, it's not all about hitting, guys. Like,
yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
It does hitting. I guess to show you, the bottom 5 is Carolina, Dallas, Columbus, Minnesota, and Pittsburgh.
So it's no real correlation there.
Right. So that's just to say the hitting. But Kevin Adams would agree with you. I'm going to bring up some not quotes, but some insider information. Is that the Sabres are believed to be interested in adding a top 6 scoring winger and a third line center to their roster. It just makes me wonder, who is he bumping out of that top 6, right? Because you got Peterka, Thompson, Tuck.
Yeah, gotta keep all those.
Skinner, Cousins, Quinn. Who's leaving the top 6?
If I were to guess, age. Jeff Skinner.
And then what do you do with a guy like Jeff Skinner? Right? If he's not scoring goals, we can talk about that later. But then a third line center, right? So I think he absolutely agrees with you. The fact that like you guys brought in those depth pieces, and I would love for those guys to be veterans, right? They need veterans, not in the sense like Oposo and Gergensons, guys getting 10, 15, 10, 20 a night, right? They need guys that are going to make meaningful contributions that have been there and done that. Yeah. So to have a guy that I know Oposo's respected and all that, but still, it's easy to overlook the guy when you clearly knew he was on his way to retirement after this season. Yes, he's the captain, but he doesn't really like command the same level of respect that, if we brought in Connor Garland right now, if we trade in the offseason for Connor Garland because you guys want to free up some cap space, right? We bring him in and all of a sudden he's that veteran presence, been there, done that. After lifting the cup, he can come in and bring some cup pedigree. And it's just that kind of guy. They need a veteran in the room who's actually going to contribute.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. What kind of value, how valuable do you see Jeff Skinner as a $4.5 million player?
As a $4.5 million player? I mean, if he's getting 25 goals, 30, if he can get to 30 goals again, that'd be great. It's tough. I still don't see him as valuable. I look at him like I did Victor Olofsson, right? Victor Olofsson was a $4.5 million player who didn't do anything but score goals, and he still couldn't do that. And Jeff Skinner scored 4 goals in his last 17 games. 3 of those came in 1 game. So if he's not scoring, what value is he providing? You take the good with the bad and whatnot. But anyway, it'll be interesting to see what we do roster wise with this team. I wanted to read 2 more quotes.
Yes.
So the first quote is going to come from Kevin Adams on coaching, and I'll then ask you about the potential list of candidates. So the first quote I've got to ask you or to tell you, Kevin Adams was quoted as saying, "I want the next head coach to be someone that has experience and can push this group to the next level." Clearly, guys, we can take the Michael Pekka and first-time guys out, right? They are immediately out, right? And there's some names on my list that yesterday, because I recorded the podcast before Kevin Adams had his presser, there's some names on my list that are first-time head coaches, and they could probably be removed. And that's exactly it. Kevin Adams and I are seeing eye to eye. So I am very happy about this. The next quote is fun. This one's from Alex Tuck. Read between every line you can, and I want to hear your take on this quote. Alex Tuck expanded on his opinion that the Sabres, quote, need and are, quote, ready for a coach who pushes them. Quote, our next coach will be one that holds us accountable and one that makes sure we're performing to the best or you're not going to perform at all. That's are strong
spicy
words.
Wow. Someone chopped up a habanero and added it into a fucking bland meal, and now all of a sudden my lips are on fire. Somebody give me some sour cream. My God. Wow. Okay. Yeah, so that's a pretty direct shot at previous Sabres coaching. I'm sure Granato and whoever came before him, I'm sure they like Donnie, but that's definitely been true, is that the Sabres have not been held accountable for not playing the way they're supposed to. And I agree. Again, that's something that's been great with Tocchet, right? You saw it with Kuzmenko. Kuzmenko scored 39 goals last year and was being benched this year, right? Miller was benched for a period. People are being scratched, right? It's about holding these players accountable and making them want to perform and really be inspired behind their coach they're performing for. And clearly, the Sabres were not inspired to try and save Donnie's job, no matter what Kalak Pozo said to the media. Um, yeah, I think you, Tuck, and Kevin Adams are all on the same page, so that's great.
Yeah, and you know what? I was really ready for it to be just some nobody again, Ralph Kruger 2.0 kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But all these quotes really do lead me to believe that this organization is going to do the right thing,
Mm-hmm.
So to your thing about Tuck taking a shot at former Sabres head coaches, the only Sabres head coach he's ever played for is Don Granato. Previously, he played for Gerard Gallant and Pete DeBoer. So, two coaches that have had success. He played 6 games in Minnesota. I'm not really going to count Bruce Boudreau in there, but I mean, Tuck knows what good coaching is, guys. Like, he's played for 3 really good coaches. And if Tuck's going to be that direct in the exit interview or the post game or the postseason, locker clean out quote, like, that is saying something. So I'm very, very excited now for this offseason, right? I was ready. I was excited when the firing happened because it's just something fresh, something new. I was disappointed because I'm like, they're going to blow it again, aren't they? And then after hearing all these quotes, I'm like, actually, maybe this is different. Maybe things are different. Because, remember, I said a month or 2 ago on this podcast that, oh, no, Don Granato will be behind the bench for the first 2 months and then get fired, and we'll have another lost season next year, right?
Yeah.
Maybe this organization's doing the right thing. Now, I do appreciate the people that say, well, he should have fired Granato sooner, but hey, look, we were still in it down at the final day. I get it was kind of a technicality at that point. We hung around at that 1% for 3 weeks. But now, Abby, let me hear your take, and you could give me your rating however you want to do it. Do you want to give me thumbs up, thumbs down, number rating, gold star, whatever?
Sure, let's do 1 through 10. 1 being you hired Ralph Kruger again, you morons, and 10 being I think he's going to take you to the cup.
All right, we have a spicy one to start. David Carl.
David Carl, that's an interesting one. Why don't you give me a little rundown on David Carl?
So David Carl is the head coach of Denver University, who has now taken his team to 2 titles in the last 3 years and knocked off a Michigan team 2 seasons ago that had Luke Hughes, Owen Power, Matty Beniers, Eric Portillo, just to name a few. So he is currently Denver's head coach. After coming off another national title this year, is certainly going to get some phone calls for head coaching jobs. If the Sabres were to hire him straight out of college ranks, how would you feel?
It's very interesting. Does he have any assistant coaching experience in the NHL at all?
I do not believe he does.
And then I'm going to put this at a 5 out of 10 because there's a lot of upside there. You have someone who other teams may not have had a chance to give a chance to, or someone who also has a pedigree of success in their league, but does not have that NHL experience, which seemed like one of the kind of crucial points that Kevin Adams was going over there. Personally, I'm thinking if it were the Canucks in that position, I wouldn't be comfortable with that because I think college hockey and NHL hockey are 2 very different things. And I would want at least some AHL experience before you're hiring someone. So I think I'd give it a 5 out of 10. There's definitely some upside there, but I feel like there's a lot of better candidates out there that would have more of the NHL experience and understand better dealing with because if you're a college coach, right, you are only dealing with players from the ages of 18 to 22, 23, right? There's a whole bunch of different things you're dealing with as an NHL coach, right? You got players with families, players with kids, players who are older, right, and have whatever pressures or different dynamics come with being an older person in life in general, right? They're not old, right? They're in their late 20s and 30s, but it's a lot different than when you're in your young 20s and your late teens where your brain hasn't even fully developed, right? It's very different dynamics. So I think with that kind of difference, I'd put them at a 5 out of 10.
I think you are more generous than I am. I would probably go with a 4. Not too dissimilar, but it's one of those oh no, yes, he's got the college pedigree, but college coaches struggle. I mean, we saw what's his face. He coached BU during the Eichel era, and they were great. And then he came and coached the Rangers and was terrible. Shoot, I forget his name.
I don't know his name either.
Anyway, the next coach I got for you is Craig Berube.
Ooh, I'm gonna go ahead and give this a solid 8.5. I'm not Craig Berube's biggest fan, but even I can acknowledge a Stanley Cup winning coach. I think he'd be a very good fit for the Sabres, and he would certainly whip them into shape. He kind of has, like, I would say, a similar level goaltender from Jordan Binnington to UPL, where UPL wasn't necessarily the biggest name the same way Binnington was, still a young goalie, and would end up becoming a proper kind of starter over time. I think UPL's kind of similar, where he's had a killer season. I don't want to burst your bubble, but I don't exactly expect him to keep up a 920, 930 save percentage. But I think he can become a solid starter in this league. So I think he'll have a similar level goalie. He'll have, again, a talented team that's underperforming, same way the Blues were. So I think he may be a very... I'm gonna up it to a 9, actually. I'm going to give him a 9 out of 10. I think he's a good fit for this team.
Again, I'm going to slightly be less optimistic. I'm going to give him a 7. I just worry about his more defensive leaning, I believe, and how that's going to mesh with the roster. But if he's a good enough coach to get the best out of his players, he'll figure it out. And, you know, he might have played defensive in St. Louis because that's the kind of roster they had, right? They had Ryan O'Reilly. They had Pietrangelo,
Braden
Shen, and, you know, they didn't have the Kairos of the world like they do now, but they started to get those guys. And he kind of faltered, right? The team started to lose his identity with Kyrou and Thomas and those guys. And now all of a sudden, you know, 6th place last year, fired this year. So we'll see. I still think that he could do it, but we'll see. Lindy Ruff is our next coach.
I think you saw. I'm a little higher on Lindy Ruff. Both those Stars teams and actually no, I would say Stars less so. More the Devils kind of had that high octane offense, Jack Hughes and co. Stars less so, but they had Klingberg, they had Jason Robertson. I don't know if Jason Robertson was there during his time, but Sagan and Ben for sure. So I know you're not as big on him just because he is kind of an old voice, but I'm going to put him just below Berube. I'm going to give him an 8.5.
Okay, I can see that. I'm going to give this a 6. I know Sabres fans are like, how could you? It's just like, you know, he coached 15 seasons here. Like, I bringing him back, bring back the glory days. I get it. He can still coach, but, you know, clearly his record's not as glowing as you might remember, right? He's coached 23 seasons in the NHL. He has made the playoffs on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 appearances. So about half the time. He's not exactly what I call a playoff specialist. A lot of those years where he didn't make it were the beginning of his year time in Buffalo and the end of his time in Buffalo as the team got worse, better, worse again. So I get it. He's actually, he's only made the playoffs since leaving Buffalo 3 times. Twice in his 4 years with Dallas and once in his 4 years with New Jersey. So not ideal there, you know, about after his Buffalo time. But again, legendary coach here in Buffalo. So I obviously can't hate Lindy, and I wouldn't hate it if he came back. I just think that there's other options, and it's time for a new direction. Okay, next coach, Seth Appert, Rochester Americans head coach.
I'm going to give this a 6. I've kind of seen what Travis Green was able to do with the Canucks, and he was pretty decent at first, good little shot in the arm. But I think when you have coaches like Lindy Ruff and Craig Berube out there, I think you just have more experience than someone who's been to the dance before. Not so it's the case for Ruff. He went to as far as the 3rd round, but again, that's further than Seth Appert would have gone because he hasn't been an NHL coach before. So I'm good at 6 out of 10.
I'm giving this a 2. Listen, I don't want just another company guy. We need a new voice, somebody that these players have never really played under, right? Okay, maybe Tux played under somebody, or you know, once before, like Greenway played under whoever we hire, right? But not the Amherst guy. You know, nothing against Seth Appert. I think he's a good head coach for Rochester. But just give me somebody who's been there, done that. He's the kind of guy that, like, okay, we're done with the old dude. Let's go get some fresh voice. And that's Seth Appert. He's not we had a fresh developmental coach that could make the playoffs, so let's hire a fresh developmental coach that's never made the playoffs in the NHL. Mm-hmm. Right? You're just kind of going sideways. It doesn't feel like you're trying to go up there. I mean, I guess you're hoping Appert's ceiling with the team is higher, but I don't know. If I heard Seth Appert got announced as a Sabres head coach, I'd be lowly optimistic. But we'll see. All right. Next coach, Todd McClellan.
Oh, that's an interesting one. He is a little older. I'm going to give him a 6.5 out of 10. I think Todd McClellan's a little bit of an older coach, and sometimes coaches that are a little older, and I know I gave Ruff a pretty high score, but they can be a little bit more out of touch kind of with modern hockey. I know he had stints with the Kings and the Sharks and the Oilers, but he is a veteran coach who has gotten pretty far. Again, I think if you're looking just to get to the playoffs and you're not so concerned about getting deep into them, then I think Todd McClellan's a good coach. So I'm going to give him a 6.5 out of 10.
Okay. I'm at a 5. Don't love it, don't hate it, right? We've seen guys coach a bunch of teams, then they just catch fire with a certain team because they just mesh, right? His pedigree is really built back in the 08 through 15 season when he was the Sharks head coach.
Yeah.
Right? First in the division, second, third, second, and then fifth when he ultimately got fired. But, he took that Oilers team, and yes, the roster wasn't the greatest, right? They still had McDavid, but, the roster was still fleshing out. They really only had one season above 500 points percentage. I'd like to see better than that. And then in LA, 2 seasons under 500, and then now 4 seasons if you count, or 3 seasons if you count this one, over 500, 2 back-to-back 60% seasons. So, again, I don't think he's the guy that's going to take us to the cup, but I am just looking to get to the playoffs at this point. I'm just looking for structure. I'm looking for something here. Maybe McClellan, maybe not. That's why I said 5. I'm not all that excited. And now I saved my best for last, Abby. My last 2 coaches. You ready? The first of those last 2 coaches, Rod Brind'Amour.
Oh my god, 10, 10, 10, 10. For those who watched Sean Spears, a.k.a. Ty Dillinger, back in the day when he entered the Royal Rumble, 10, 10, 10. Rod Brind'Amour has done wonders for the Carolina Hurricanes. They'd be foolish to fire him. Absolute 10.
Yeah, and the reason his name's on this list is because his contract is expiring at the end of this season, and it has not been renewed yet. There might be a sense of they're waiting to see what he does in the postseason. And potentially, if they lose to the Islanders, I don't really see them bringing him back, right? Because they're a team that's been there like every time, right? Like how many times are they at 110 points, just missing out on the division or on the whole league? Or I always feel like he's right around it, but when it comes to getting over that final hump, maybe not. But oh my God, his coaching career is absolutely insane. 60 points percentage, so 99 points. Then there was a shortened year. It was 59.6. Another shortened year was 80 points, 71% points percentage, 70.7, 68.9, and now 67%. I mean,
Rod the Bod, man, he's really good. And honestly, like, there's just some coaches, you just look at them and you know they're good coaches, right? Like, you just looked at Barry Trotz and kind of how he carried himself, and you knew Barry Trotz is a good coach.
John Cooper.
John Cooper, another perfect example. He's a good coach. He's one of those where you just know Rod Brind'Amour is a good coach. I think we're kind of seeing it right now in Montreal with Marty St. Louis. I think Marty St. Louis, you just look at him, you can tell he's going to be a good coach. He's had a good start with Montreal, and I think he's going to really help them out. And I think there's kind of a benefit to player coaches. And I don't mean like Bruce Boudreau, where like they're good for the players. I mean coaches that have been players in the past. So Rick Tocchet played for the Penguins in the 90s. You have Rod Brind'Amour, obviously played for the Hurricanes in the mid-2000s, late 2000s. You have Marty St. Louis, who played for the Lightning and the Rangers, etc. When you have coaches who have just were players fairly recently, they're still somewhat kind of into that player network and kind of not exactly the same because the game has changed a bit, but they understand kind of how players' minds works, what the grind is, and they've gone through it recently. It's not like they did it 30 years ago and they kind of forgotten about it now because they've been a coach for so long. It's still kind of fresh in their minds, and I think that perspective has really helped kind of coaches like that, and I think it will help Rod Brind'Amour if he comes to the Sabres, who haven't had that kind of same aspect to it. And again, that's where like if you guys weren't so focused on getting an experienced coach, someone like Michael Pekka is someone I'd like. But given that that's not the case, I think Rod Brind'Amour is just the perfect fit in every single shape, way, and form in terms of quality, fit, and then just overall X factor of a coach. I think Rod Brind'Amour makes the Carolina Hurricanes a better team. I think they're still a playoff team without him, but I think they're a worse team without him. So 10, 10, 10.
Yeah, I'm at 9.75. The only thing I worry about is his team is kind of predicated on generating a lot of low danger chances. At the same time, right? It's low danger, high danger, not much medium. We'll see if that works for the Sabres, but I mean, like I said, that knocks him off what, 0.25. I'd be absolutely running around my neighborhood if we hired Rod Brind'Amour. And I know his name may be kind of sour here in Buffalo. Obviously knocked us off in 7. He was part of that team that beat the Buffalo Sabres, who were down to like their 3rd and 4th AHL defensemen in game 7 of that series, right? And they ended up winning the cup over the Oilers. The Hurricanes did. You know, that could have been our shot at it. But I mean, I think we can bury the hatchet there. I think we can stop living in the past. And if he comes and leads us to a cup, is anybody in Buffalo going to be like, but 0506, you know? Also, another fun note about this one. Right alongside Rod Brind'Amour, Kevin Adams was on that team.
Oh, I could see some persuasion there. Interesting.
Yeah, come be part of this project. Come be part of this great team that we're building. Hey, we're this close. Like, you know, pay him well. You know, whatever. But I don't think it's gonna happen. I think, you know, you look at some teams out there. I mean, who's gonna fire their coach? What are the availabilities gonna be? Is Buffalo really going to be for the list of teams that are being calling Rod Brind'Amour if he doesn't get extended by the Hurricanes? Is he really going to be seeing us as the number one destination for him? Maybe the personal connections with Adams, you know, having played with him before, and then, you know, there's a good core to the roster here, right? He's going to see Jeff Skinner and not be thrilled about it. But, you know, we'll deal with that when we get there, if he becomes the head coach. All right, final coach before we're out in this episode, Gerard Gallant.
I am going to go 9.5. You know what? No, 9.75. If you hadn't just said Rod the Bod, I might have even said 10. I think Rod Brind'Amour is perfect, so I want to only leave one person with a perfect score. But you look at him, and I think he's obviously got the pedigree, right? He's just a good coach, and I think he'll fit the Sabres well as well. Again, I think. You know, I want to hear what you have to say about it first. I'm gonna let you go first because again, he has a lot of the similar kind of qualities of Rod Brind'Amour. But I want to hear what you have to say about it.
I really like Gerard Gallant. The only thing that scares me is lasting 2 seasons in New York and what happened most recently in Alexis Lafreniere situation and Capo Caco and how none of those younger, really high draft pick, talented guys that are now starting to look a lot better now that he's gone. The Sabres are basically a roster full of that. So that does concern me, but I think I'm at a 7 or an 8. You know, I think I'm right there. You know, there were reports from the New York Post that the players' exit interviews with Chris Drury was a big reason why Gallant got fired too. So that is another big red flag for me. If he's not meshing with this new generation of player and isn't working there, you know, I think he's a good head coach. Again, it worries me, but we've seen him have success in Vegas with the Island of Misfit Toys. He had success in Florida. Really, the only place he hasn't had success is Columbus, but nobody has success in Columbus.
Nope.
Except for Torts. Torts is like the only guy.
Torts is like, he has a limited shelf life. So wherever he goes, he'll probably have some level of success, but it's only going to be success for X amount of time.
Yeah. He was their 3rd head coach in franchise history, Gallant was, of the Blue Jackets, not Tortorella. But I think Tortorella is the only guy that made the playoffs. They've made the playoffs, I think, 6 times as a franchise and 4 times under under Tortorella. So obviously, if Tortorella was on the market, I'd say yes. I don't love the fit with the current roster we have, but it's just something. Just give me something different.
Yeah. I think this is just one of my kind of final thoughts on Gallant. I think I'm going to reduce him a little bit. I'll go to 9.25. I still think he's a very good coach. I think, obviously, Cup Finals pedigree with the Panthers and the Golden Knights, or at least the Golden Knights, sorry. And again, he's dealt with high-skill teams. And I think, ultimately, the Sabres are a high-skill team. Lots of young, highly skilled forwards. So, yes, he kind of had a bit of a stumble there with New York. But I think I wouldn't judge it just off of that. I'd be curious to see if it's a young person problem or if that was a specifically Lafreniere Capo Caco problem.
Yeah,
right? Because players like Keandre Miller, Panarin, I think Keandre Miller played pretty well under him, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, the team did well, 110 points and 107 points, so you can't really look back at his results and say, oh, he's a bad head coach. But the fact that that happened, he didn't immediately get another job and is still looking. I mean, yeah, I'd like to see, but maybe that year off will be good for him, and he's taking a year off. It looks like everywhere he's gone. He's at least taken a year off. But I think Gallant would be a great hire. That is, like I said, again, he's a better coach than Don Granato. Just does scare me a little bit with that most recent stint. It's like, what have you done for me lately kind of league? 110 points. Players hated him. He got fired after 2 seasons. And yes, they lost in 7 to the Devils, who were playing ridiculously, right? So, you just look at that and you're like, I had another thing. Yes, I know what it was. Speaking of the Columbus Blue Jackets, I think Don Granato would be the perfect head coach for the Columbus Blue Jackets right now.
I agree. Yeah, it's a good development coach. I think I want to look at their I'm gonna pull up their daily face-off. I honestly can't even remember what their team looks like. Like they got like Voronikov and
we can talk about that later. I think as far as what we wanted to cover with this podcast, we have just about hit it all. We're really out of time here, Abby. So just really quickly, give me one team from each conference you are excited to watch in this postseason.
I'm going to think really hard about the West. I think I'm going to go with the Vancouver Canucks.
Okay, no, you can't pick Vancouver.
No, I'm just kidding. I'll probably take the Dallas Stars. I'll be curious to see how good Ottinger can be and how far he can kind of take them in the West. And they can really, they're probably the team I would predict to come out of the West, if not the Canucks. And then the East. You know what? The Capitals. You know what? Charlie Lindgren has been really good this year, and I know you just called Ovechkin washed, but if you look at his second half of his season, that's when he heated up and started scoring goals. So I'd be curious to see if that translates into the playoffs.
All right, and then I'm going to stick with my original 2 teams that I said before the season ever started. I'm saying the Edmonton Oilers. I think, that heater they were on, did they figure it out? The coaching change, right? That's going to be so interesting to see how they do this postseason, right? Obviously, I'm going to be watching the Canucks, but since I can't pick them, I'm saying the Oilers are a team that I'm really, really excited to watch. And the other team that I'm excited to watch, we just spoke about them, the Carolina Hurricanes. What are they going to do now with Jake Gensel? Second best team right now in the Eastern Conference, right? Like second best team in the East, but they do have to go up against the Islanders. Will they be able to just handle the Islanders and handle their business and take on the Rangers in round 2, right? It'll be fun. It'll be interesting to see. I have them picked. I picked them before the season, and I'm still holding out hope. I had them going head-to-head in the Cup with Edmonton Oilers winning there. But we'll see how that goes. But guys, thank you so much for sticking with us this entire time. It's been a good one. We've got season recap for the Sabres coming up with dedicated podcast to both teams when their seasons are over. We'll get to the Sabres eventually. The Canucks, you guys, your season's still going. So enjoy it, guys. Go Canucks. And I will talk to you guys in the next one.
Peace.